For those out in the forum, I just wanted to announce that we are starting the morning 9 a.m. AGM, and we'd welcome at least one signatory representative from your organization with us in the Guggenheim, if that's possible. Or you can listen out there, but at some point we will be asking you to make a raise of hands, so that's why we're suggesting it. Thank you. Over to you, Jelger.
Well, good morning, everybody. So it's my final business meeting. That's kind of fun. As president. What I want to do this morning is have a little look back to the past year. What have we done? What challenges have we faced? What solutions did we find? And also maybe reflect a little bit on the last few days. Thank you. I have a clicker. Awesome. There we go. Then we will go into the changes of the statutes with a motion. We'll do a regional spotlight. Anthony will give us a little bit of feedback about what we've been doing in the Asian Pacific region. Of course, there's some board members rolling off and some new board members joining us. And we will actually be having a new president after this meeting. So, looking forward to that. So let's see how we get on. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or just shout or whatever. Because this, if you ask me, this is going to be an informal catch-up so that you know where we are as an organization. So, president's report, not so much. All right. Let's see. So last year, of course, we had our annual meeting in Jordan, which was very challenging, as you can imagine, from several aspects. I mean, it was the regional conflict, of course, made it very difficult, but also because of that, a lot of people had to cancel coming over, and we had some very major financial challenges from that. But fortunately, as we've highlighted already earlier this week, we have some very generous and loyal sponsors and patrons who stuck with us. So we were able to bounce back. At the same time, on the day I was going to fly to Jordan and prepare for the annual meeting, I got a call telling us that this year's host, who was supposed to be the German academic Department of Education, had to pull out because of political reasons. There were elections and new government, and well, we all know what that can mean sometimes. So we had to pivot and find a new place to go to, which was quite challenging as president, I can tell you, to work on the annual meeting in Jordan and then at the same time try to find out what can we do for next year and make sure that we can continue doing this great work. But we were able to pivot, and that's why we're here. Also, again, thanks to some of our sponsors, especially ACRO for being co-host, but also University of San Diego has helped us out, and the local team. So I think it turned out really well. I'm really happy that we're here. But those are some of the challenges we had to face right off the bat. At the same time, as you all know, our previous executive director, Herman de Leeuw, stepped down after the annual meeting in Groningen, so we had to make sure that we could continue as an organization with a new executive director. So we had to transition to a new way of working with Joanne Douglas and her team. It's worked out fantastic, but it was challenging. I mean, a lot of you know Herman. He has, I think, the most knowledge in his head of anybody I know. But it's not easy getting it all out and getting it on paper. And so what we've been doing this last year especially was working on policies, setting out structures to make sure that everything is duly registered. How do we handle specific situations? What do we do with the nomination processes, et cetera, et cetera? So really trying to move into a more professional organization. And I think we've done very well, but it's been hard work. It's rewarding because we're reaping the fruits of our work, but it's been quite challenging. And I also have to say that I, and I'm sure my fellow board members will agree, have to thank Joanne for all the work that she's put in to help us through that process. Because it's really about gathering all the information from all the different places and make sure that we put it in documents that we can keep using to be more sustainable as an organization. So, yeah. And what we've been doing, part of our this new transition into a new type of organization, almost I would say, is trying to do more regional outreach. I'm not going to go into it too much because Anthony will be giving an update about that. But what we've done is we did a diplomatic mission, I called it, to Australia to try and reach out to as many of our stakeholders and potential stakeholders to try and grow the network. Very successful and definitely a model that we will be using in the future. And also we've been doing webinars over the last few months, trying to invite some new signatories or old-timers to speak about the value that GDN brings to them and what they can bring to the organization. And hopefully that will help us to do more outreach. We want to continue to do that. Joanne and her team are setting those webinars up as we speak. So there will be more news about that. But it's been quite exciting. And I think those are the things that we need to do as an organization. Keep looking for ways to broaden our scope, expand our network, and build on the network of networks. If I'm forgetting anything, please feel free to interrupt. Looking forward, next year, we have our wonderful Norwegian hosts next year. Some of them are here, but not all of them. But maybe you can stand up so that everybody can see the delegation from Norway. And one of the things that we've been doing is we visited their offices last spring so that we could get a feel for the venue and a feel for the city. And that actually, I think, was a great model because it's an opportunity for the board to get together for more than just a normal board meeting, but a strategic board meeting that was 2 full days. But also it's a way to feel what next year could be like, what the potential is for next year's meeting. And I'm very excited, I can't wait. So really looking forward to that. But also, we've put out a bid for proposals for future hosts. And I am very happy to announce that we've got a wonderful proposal from our South African colleagues at SAQA, which we were very happy to accept, which means that in 2026, 10 years after the meeting in Cape Town, we will be returning to South Africa. There will be more news about that, but I'm really happy that we have 2 hosts back-to-back that are committed to the organization and that we can feel very confident about moving forward. So thank you so much, both of you. Just give them a hand. So I was already telling you about the ways that we are looking for deepening and broadening engagement. We will be doing more of that, but it depends on our new president, what her visionary ideas are. I'm sure she'll tell you all about it. No, but all kidding aside, we've seen that it's a successful strategy. So we want to build further on that. But if you have any ideas or you want to be involved, if you're thinking, I would want to be part of one of those webinars, reach out to Joanne so that we can see what we can do and showcase the both of us or whoever to the rest of the network. And of course, we'll have a new board. We have a new board of directors. That's an official part of this business meeting where we will be transitioning into the new board. But of course, it's a major change for us. And I'm happy to be part of that. Let's see. So for me, just looking back at my 2 years as chair of this board, it's been very much about evolving the network into a more professional organization. We're all very passionate, but we are also all volunteers. So we need to make sure that we have an organization that's strong enough to ride out some of the waves that you meet during the storm, and that's an organization that's also able to capitalize on opportunities that we see. So we're still and will continue to working towards a more sustainable organization. And two of the things that we're working on that are very practical is changing our corporate structure, both in Europe and here in the US. Which means that in the US we will be setting up a 501c3. And this is one of the things that our advisory council helped us with. So Rick, for instance, Rick Torres, and also Melanie and Acro have been very helpful in giving us advice on how do we make sure that we anchor our organization more in the US so that honestly, we open up more opportunities for fundraising, donations, sponsorships, that kind of thing, because it just helps us from a fiscal point of view to have an entity like that here in the US. I'm sure you'll understand. And we're doing the same thing in Europe by setting up an NB. It doesn't change anything to our legal status in the Netherlands, other than that will provide tax benefits for organizations or individuals that want to donate or contribute to the organization. One of the things that come with these changes is mandatory transparency, which is a good thing. If you apply to be an NB, it's a Dutch acronym, I won't spell it out, but one of the things that you are that you have to do is provide transparency about your financial status. You have to make public your policy statements, not just to our network partners, but to the rest of the world, actually, which means that we will be making changes to our website to make sure that that information is accessible for everybody to see. This also means that we will be making some changes into our statutes when adopted by our signatories. Why is that needed? We want more continuity in our leadership. One of the things that were in the statutes, for instance, was that we need to show our financial statements during the annual meeting, which seems nice and transparent, but actually when we make it public through our website, it'll be updated much more regularly than a once in a year update to the annual meeting. I think this is a change for the better. I'm actually going to ask Joanne if you want to elaborate a little bit on this slide.
This is about the case for change that is in the resource section for the roundtable we're doing at 2 o'clock today. Melanie and I are going to co-facilitate that because we want to have a theming moment where we draw from all of you your reflections in a very consistent way and deep way after having gone through 3 days of conversation to help us continue to frame moving forward. And so I encourage you to go to the 2 o'clock session on the Network of Networks conversation and review the case for change there. It's also up on the conference website. And reflect even further on these ideas. Generally speaking, these are some of the highlight reels, and you'll see this network of networks concept pictorially represented and explained there. But I think that's part of the moving forward that this board has been discussing, and this really puts into words what they've been saying in a way that you can find yourself as we start to build bridges, such as with T3 innovation and the like. And so wanted to just make sure this was here for you, Jelger, for that purpose.
Okay. There we go, Anthony. And me.
And you.
Since Anthony is the secretary, the formal process is that he is managing our statutes from that aspect.
Go to the next slide.
Yeah, we can.
So, as Jelger identified, we need to make a number of changes to set us up going forward to give us more flexibility from the board perspective. I mean, these are largely. So what we'll do is I'll quickly run in the next slide. We've got a highlight of the changes. So, which thematically around expanding the term for the executive positions and board members, creating the opportunity to amend statutes and bylaws without consent from the annual meeting. The ambient 501c3 status changes around the transparency, and particularly noting the board will always be transparent about changes needed and share and keep the community involved. But it really was giving us some more agility as we're going forward to be able to make decisions and act quickly where required. And so as part of this, we need to have a formal motion, which I will propose, which in effect is, so I put that the changes to the statutes for the reasons identified in the slide are approved by the annual meeting. Can I have a seconder?
There we go. Great.
And if we can have by a show of hands from the signatory, or
every signatory has one vote. So if you're here with multiple people from your organization, you can have one vote. So all in favor?
But I guess we should. I mean, as Kathleen, sorry, I should say. Does anybody? The actual details of the changes are up. I think we shared them through this event, and they're up on the resource centre. So as Jelger noted in the open.
And maybe I can go into it a little bit. Looking at the expanded term, is what we've done is we've actually changed the term for our vice presidents, president, and immediate past president from 1 year to 2 years, because we've experienced, especially during the transition that I was just talking about, that 1 year chairing the board, it doesn't really give you enough time to work on the agenda that you want to work on. And then if you change that president's term to 2 years, it automatically means that you have to change the VP and the past president's term also, so that you have that continuity in leadership. And actually, honestly, we've already been doing this. And it was very helpful for me because it also meant that I had Kathleen as a mentor for another year, which was very helpful. So I think it's also about making sure that you keep your collective memory in the board active. So that's the first one. The changing of the statutes, now we need consent from our annual meeting. That only convenes once a year. Whenever there's a situation where we would need changes to the statutes quickly, and that can happen, you never know what kind of circumstances you run into as a board. I felt, so this came from me, I felt that it's just not smart business to have to wait sometimes maybe 9-10 months to be able to change your statutes at the annual business meeting in person. So that's why we're proposing to change this. But of course, as Anthony was saying, we will always be transparent and explain what kind of changes we are making, because we want our network to be involved and engaged in the work that we're doing. And like I said, the transparency about the finances, I just think it makes much more sense to publish them on the website, which is mandatory if you change your status to a 501c3 and an NB, which means that whenever you want to know what the current situation is, you can just check the information on the website instead of just waiting. But maybe you don't care. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, is there any questions? Is there anybody who has a remark?
Over.
Yeah? Maybe.
Wait.
We'll get you a mic so that everybody can hear.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Ton.
Thank you. So Jasmine Saidi Kienert, I'm with Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute. Thank you for the presentation and all the changes that you're proposing, and I'm supporting all of that. My question is the amendment statutes and bylaws without consent for, from the annual meeting. Any consideration in having maybe a special meeting or emergency meeting just to get the insights or inputs of the membership?
I mean, we could, if there's a lot of questions or people want to share input, we could do that. What I can tell you, I'm a lawyer, so with that legal perspective, Dutch law doesn't. How do you say that? It's not mandatory to have this in your statutes. We put this in the statutes because we, and I say we, I wasn't even part of the organization back then, because we wanted to make sure that we kept our network engaged. So it's, technically, we don't even need permission to change the statutes. It's in the statutes so that it forces us as a board to keep communicating with our network partners, which we will definitely keep doing. So that's why we are changing it to be more flexible. But it would be crazy if we just do things in splendid isolation, because without our network partners, there is no GDN. Does that answer your question?
I think she's okay.
Melanie? Oh. Oh. Yep. Francisco.
Thank you, Don. I'm sure you make sure of this, but I just want to ask, did you make sure that our statutes can pass exactly equally to be an American and USA organization? I mean, is there something that we have to change just to be an American organization?
Very good question. No, there's not. We can set up a US chapter. We don't need to provide for that in these statutes because it'll be a separate entity. It's the statutes from that separate entity that we need to make sure that it's connected to the GDN properly. And of course, that's a process that we are working on and that we will be sharing with the network so that everybody knows what we're doing. That's part of the transparency that I'm talking about. But the Dutch statutes within the Dutch law give us the opportunity and the possibility to do this. We don't have to change anything to make that happen. Actually, we could set up a chapter in every part of the world if we would want to.
Actually, my question goes in the sense of in the new entity in the States, or if the new entity in the States can have the same statutes, exactly the same statutes that the Dutch entity.
I can't answer that. I don't know. Melanie, you want to?
I'll come over. I can answer it a little bit. They can't be exactly the same because the legal framework in the U.S. is slightly different. There are some legal requirements that we have to maintain. But from a philosophical standpoint, we can absolutely have the same goals as an entity. And so that's going to be the work of the board and a working group over the next year, is really to firm up what that looks like and ensure that we are both in alignment and legally compliant So that is the work of a small working group of the organization. So the intention is to make it the same, and what we hope is that this might set up a model for what a process might be for establishing actual future chapters. And so this is a test and a pilot, and we hope that by doing this we'll learn a lot, and then we'll be able to open that up as we activate other areas of the world.
Okay.
Another question down the back?
Hi, Kevin from one of the three companies earlier. So on the 501c3, which I'm a huge advocate for, within the US, there are restrictions on different localities that you can do business with outside of the US. Does that preclude some of the missional goals of GDN in any way? I don't know if that's been contemplated, but just in terms of the different countries that we have restrictions on our business in terms of countries that we can do business with. Yep. So I'm just wondering about that.
It is something that we've discussed. I'm just going to go and grab the mic because I'm going to give it to Melanie because she's had more experience with this. But it's definitely something we've discussed within the board. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit on.
Yeah, again, because it will be a North American chapter, I don't think that it will impact that, because the goal will be the North American chapter will not necessarily be doing the work around the globe. It will be activating in North America and feeding up to the larger organization. So we don't anticipate that. It is something that, legally we are looking at and working with an attorney on.
Yep.
You want to add to that, Joanne?
Yeah.
Oh, you have a mic, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and thank you, Kevin, also for giving your advice through this process. It's appreciated. We are also consulting legally in the U.S., and that's why we've been advised to set it up separately so that we can focus it properly and still use it as a vehicle to help with some of our capacity building goals where it makes sense in various regions. So I think that we're good and we should be fine on this score, and we'll keep checking in with legal advisors in the U.S. as we go along. It's a good question.
One of the suggestions I would make is 501c3, this is for everyone, is a tax-exempt organization, and modeling it after other organizations that have already passed through this process, right? So Rotary, for example, I'm a member of Rotary, and it's international, and it has chapters, and each club or each local chapter has a setup process that enables, let's say, you have to have 20 founding members, you have to have certain rules. I think we can look at other organizations that have set up very similar things. I'm sure you're already doing this, but I think it's a wonderful idea. And again, I would definitely be a sponsor of it in America.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay.
We appreciate it.
We have more questions.
Any other questions?
And I think we're
Turn
ready
to the motion, if everybody
Yep.
remembers what it was.
Yep.
Let me write it.
That in effect, that we endorse approve the change to the statutes as set out in the document that's been provided on the website, in line with the drivers and principles outlined in the slide.
Yeah. So everybody in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. That's definitely 50% plus one. So we're good to go. Thank you so much for your vote and for your questions, and we will keep updating you about all these new initiatives and whatever. And if that raises any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to any of us so that we can answer.
I'm just writing it down so I have it.
Anthony.
Thank you. So,
I'll give you the clicker.
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. So that, the talk of the chapter in the US also made me think that have had a number of attempts in APAC in Australia and New Zealand to sit with the idea of the chapter. And I think one of the things that the work now we're talking about in North America really highlights, you need something to really catalyse it, to really sort of drive for there to be a need. And so one of the things that, so we ran the symposium in Singapore in 2023, which was very successful, but also it's a one-off, and it didn't necessarily generate the ongoing interest. And so hence the suggestion of a delegation, and as a way to try to really assess what are the concerns or needs of a particular area or region, and what are the opportunities going forward, as a way to say, okay, what do we want to do there that might actually benefit the creation of a more formal chapter, or is it just undertaking work around particular projects? And so, as you can see, the summary here was that we had Yelga, Wei-Jun, myself, and Joanne, as well as some participation from the patrons from Wei Ping from CSSD and Kevin from Parchment, and we had 15 meetings over 4 days. So it was pretty full on, I'd have to say, but including attendance at the MyEquals Connect event, where the members of the delegation were on a number of panels. But these meetings were with federal government departments, with universities, with some current signatories, with some peak bodies, and I think it was a really, really good way to engage, and we've had a number of connections from this that we've been able to continue to work through and really get some meaningful and concrete outcomes. From a conceptual sense, we've got the case study that Joanne and her team pulled together based on the work that was done, which is under the resources section on the website, which I would really encourage you to have a look at. But one of the other really gratifying elements of that, we were able to make a connection with Business New South Wales, which is New South Wales being a state in Australia, which is a Chamber of Commerce. And so they became signatories. So that was our first employer body signatory. And again, it also demonstrated the value of the broader network, because we got that initial connection with Business New South Wales through some of the local Parchment teams, so Taki and Dan, who we were working with Nigel from Business New South Wales about a joint response to the government's national skills passport. So it just really demonstrated the power of the network, but also the benefit of being very, very focused and targeted as a way, as a market entry type sort of idea. And so I would say I think it was very successful. We've got at least one concrete immediate outcome, and Business New South Wales very keen to be continuing to involve. They had some connection with the T3 network as well, and involved in some of the webinars, and want to do some more around that. And we've got now a list of engaged, or at least semi-engaged, know who we are, broader groups that we can actually continue to work with. And again, and I think from a process type perspective, we've now created a model that we can use in any region. And so I think on that basis, I think it was an excellent experiment that I would say worked well.
Definitely. And I want to add that Anthony's very modest, but he's put in a lot of work, he and has, to make this happen. But also, I don't think I've ever been as tired as after that week, but it was amazing and very successful. I totally agree.
Thank you.
So what's next? Let me see. The Executive Director report. Joanne.
So thank you so much for everybody who's contributed to this particular annual meeting. I wanted to start with that because it takes all of us to do this work, and I've been very grateful. It was also wonderful for the team to meet some of you. It's not all the team, but it's some of the people we tap into to make these kinds of things happen and to help move the GDN forward into the next emerging space that we're trying to take it into. We actually did more in 2023. We did have an experimental event in Singapore. I think some of you were there. That was high learning for us, and why we moved to a different strategy of missions and delegation visits, which we hope to continue to deepen. When we were in Norway, we also were in Groningen, and we met with various colleagues, including in The Hague and so on. And that's what we want to keep doing, is having intentional small moments with key people that are doing very important work in their regions so that we can help them and they can help us, and together we can build out the network of networks. So there's some under external expansion. You can see some of the good work. I do want to do a call out for Koichi Nakasaki and Dr. Roxana Rajab. They had a session here, which we supported. There's a paper coming out soon on governance, and we're looking for input. So that kind of intentional work, a call out to Rick as well for helping support that. We also had a technology working group. Some of the same people were helping as well as others. And we published that paper from their work that's now online. And we've been deepening, with your good help, Julie, some of the ways we're positioning the resources and research on the webpage. So we're going to be launching a new website. We hope to have it done for this event. That was not possible, but you're seeing little teasers emerge that are going to be featured in the new environment that we're creating for all of you, including a new logo as we revision and rebrand and move forward. This is important. We are actually sitting in a conference that's the largest in person the GDN has ever held, because one of the calls the board made to me was, we need to make a more precise message about who the GDN is and where we're heading. Thank you to those of you who have helped with that by doing the webinars, the videos, the benefits videos, et cetera. We publish many of those on our website, as well as in the attendee hub. People are watching them. It's bringing clarity of thought. We have organizations that are coming back to us. We had 9 signatories at this event, which is extraordinary. I've been to a few events in recent years, and that's not what we've had. We also want to do more for and with our patrons, who dedicate quite a lot of time and resources to the GDN to make it successful. And that's why we did the certificate ceremonies, because we're trying to say thank you, but we need more patrons. So that's also a priority for us. In addition, you saw 3 partnerships. We need more MOUs, but these are not just things on paper. There are specific deliverables that we have to achieve with these MOUs, and we're trying to use the structure we've created around the webinars, around the delegation visits, possibly more learning and convening opportunities with these partners. And I know, Mamta, we didn't do an MOU you sponsored, but we're looking at even places like India, et cetera, and talking to Wes, et cetera. So as we look forward into the future, lots happening. We are doing a lot internally as well to rebirth the infrastructure and the systems and trying to create more efficiencies, because it's not a wealthy organization, and we're trying to be as streamlined and scalable as possible so that we aren't wasting everybody's time and taking up unnecessary resources. So it may not be me that's doing something, it may be somebody else on my team that's doing it, but financially that makes sense for the GDN. So yes, the call I would make to all of you in closing, in terms of the executive director report, keep bringing in the feedback that you've been bringing to me so that we can do continuous improvement, continue to move forward and we can all do our part to support this board and organization to be successful. The last comment that I would make is just thank you for appreciating the team that are here in person. They've really appreciated your feedback. They are so dedicated to the GDN. They are here not as GDN paid employees, but as volunteers who have come to say, we want to pitch in and want to do our part for this important organization. So we have many people in many spaces who are here trying to make this successful, and I look forward to further conversations later on at the Network of Networks convening that we're doing in the afternoon. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to hear them, even here.
No questions?
No.
Okay. It's my turn now to give you the nominations report. And actually, I'm going to go up to because I have to read from my board.
Go for it.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. I appreciate that you are present to participate in an important aspect of the GDN annual meeting, which is this business meeting. And we appreciate your engagement, actually, in the organization in this way. So one of those forms of engagement is actually to be nominated or nominate yourself to participate on the board of the GDN, the board of directors. And so this year in the spring, I, as interim immediate past president, am accountable under the statutes to run the nominations process and to form a nominations committee, which I did with the help of the incoming president and the current president, so Melanie and Yelger. And the three of us, with Joanne's considerable support, put out a call for nominations for new board directors across the world. This was not only through a direct email to signatories and others, friends of GDN, but also to through LinkedIn and so on. You know that we have an active LinkedIn account, which many of us encourage. You do need to be a signatory of the GDN to be a board member. And so we did receive nominations this spring, and the committee, the subcommittee, considered those nominations and made recommendations to the board. Before I go through telling you, there were 4 vacancies. So I wanted to just ask those who are in attendance today who are leaving the board to just stand, and I'll also name those who are not able to be here today. There are 4 people who you know, actually myself included, so this sounds a little bit of self-aggrandizing, but anyway. You know, really who gave of their hearts and minds to the GDN, and in doing so, have done so for a number of years now. And that includes whether it's hosting conferences or it's contributing to some strategic planning and execution of goals on the board. It's a fair amount of work in the sense that if you're committed, you can roll up your sleeves, and really it's a working board, right? We do count on each other's expertise. So I want to name those 4 people and ask for a round of applause at the end once I do. 2 cannot be here with us today, and I'm going to name them first. Ami Shroff was a previous president and vice president and past president of the board. She is from India and she could not join us today. So Ami Shroff is stepping down. A round of applause for Ami. Another who could not be here today is Alexander Knott from Germany. Alexander was previously with DAD, DAAD, and is now with Deloitte. Unfortunately, he was not able to travel. He was actually, company has limitations on international travel, so he was not able to join us. Alexander was treasurer of the organization for a number of years and rolled up his sleeves and did quite a lot of work in times when we were very challenged financially, and so thank you, Alexander. A third is Meg Wanger, and Meg is also has been on the board for some time now, is an incredible contributor from the perspective and voice of fair recognition and standards, as well as just, you know, generally being very on the ball in terms of you know, contributions around strategy. And so thank you very much, Meg. And then I, too, am leaving the board. So,
And Kathleen has been our president, as you know, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I would just say that because there were 4 vacancies, it was really important to do a thorough job of bringing new people on the board. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize is the board is by definition and nature and principle and goal diverse. Diverse in every way we can think in terms of the talents they bring, the regions of the world they may represent or currently live in, the type of work that they do, and so on and so forth. And so diversity is really a fundamental principle and value of the GDN. We want to bring all voices we can, all the voices we can to the table to hear from the global south, from the global north, from, you know, every part of the world. And so the new board, I would emphasize, is equally diverse, and that we're proud of that accomplishment. And the new board directors were approved by the full board, the existing board, earlier this late summer, actually. Sorry, mid-July. I think we did that in Norway, if I remember correctly. And so I would just invite them to stand up as I mention their names. And you're going to hear one again because she is just all in for support of the GDN, which I love. So I'll start with Meg Wenger, who's returning. Is Eslen here? Eslen? Okay, who is from Turkey, by the way, so she is joining the board. I don't see her here right now. Oh, where is she? Oh, there she is. Thank you. Yeah. Becca? Becca, are you in the audience? Wonderful. From Canada. And also Charmaine, if you would stand as well. So so I was supposed to turn that over. I just realized I was looking. It's not a lot of content, so I'll fill in the gaps. So after we choose the board, then the board, according to our statutes, decides who will be the board executive, the officers. And so we also did that work toward the early part of the fall. And again, we invited nominations and self-nominations from existing board members. And we received nominations, and then the board nominations committee considered those and made recommendations to the board. I will tell you, we are doing more and more to formalize and professionalize this process. And I want to emphasize that because we do have written documents around the skills and competencies required. There's a word we've heard a lot of at this. You know, the competencies required to be an effective board member that are both unique to the GDN and then more generally important as a contributor on a board and a board executive. And so we will continue to build that out. That information out, and although I won't be on the board, I know Jelger will take that on and continue to professionalize with the support from Joanne, who created a competency framework and so on. So we take this very seriously. So the board did approve the recommendations from the nomination subcommittee, and I would like to let you know now who the new board executive will be. I'm going to start with Meg. Meg was nominated to be treasurer and is accepted and was approved by the board. Thank you, Meg. And now we also have Anthony, who's returning as secretary to the board. Thank you, Anthony. Charmaine Hack, who will come to the board as vice president. So. And then Jelger, who fulfills the role as immediate past president. And Melanie, who is Melanie? Oh, she's still there. Okay, you're moving around, and Melanie will become your new president of the board. So I would just say, I don't think I've missed anybody in laying out the board executive. I just want to acknowledge that this is a talented group of people. The full board is a talented group of people, so you're in good hands moving forward. And that means that I feel very confident stepping away that they're going to do excellent work for you, but also with your help. So remember that we are going to be calling on you, not me, them. They'll be calling on you. I'm sure they'll be calling on me to roll up our sleeves and help them to accomplish goals, because it really does take the full community. And that, again, I want to emphasize the diversity of thought and approach and perspective and understanding of the world is really critical for our work. And we've heard a lot about that at the conference. And so I just want to underscore that. The last thing, I know that we're out of time, but I do want to mention that we also have the Strategic Advisory Council and of sage individuals who are so committed to the GDN and have demonstrated that commitment through years of contribution of their professional expertise, wisdom, strategic thinking, and there are also many who support us financially. So we're very, very grateful. And there is some turnover. The board accepted a recommendation to invite key people to continue in their role on the Strategic Advisory Council, whose roles normally would expire at this point in time. And so I just wanted to thank Rick Torres for continuing to be chair. And we also voted to approve inviting Victoriano Giralt, who is also one of the founders, and Janie Barnett, who could not be at the conference this time round, but also will be extended. And if of course, this was a vote to approve inviting her to extend, since she's not here, we want to reach out to her. But that means we also added a number of members over the past 18 months. And so I would just invite everyone who is a member of the Strategic Advisory Council who is here to please stand so that others in the room can see who you are if you're here. Everyone just please stand. Simone, yeah, Margaret, there's Victoriano. Okay. So this is an important group of people. So I think that is it in terms of my report to the group. I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure, a wonderful learning opportunity, and really enriching for me. But I hope I've done everything I possibly could have to support the GDN in the time that I've been on the board. And it's, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for that opportunity. Thanks. Leave the stage.
Okay. Melanie, you want to come up here? So just, I know we're over time, but there are some things I do want to say. Kathleen has been instrumental in moving this organization to where we are headed now. So I just want to acknowledge that you've done, not just during your term as president, but after that also, really committed to the organization, and I will be forever thankful for that. So I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. We already gave her a round of applause, but let's just do it again. Also, I want to say, Kathleen already mentioned Janie Barnett. She's been our sponsorship coordinator for years. I know our sponsors maybe sometimes were annoyed by her persistence, but it worked. She has decided to step down and retire, which is a good thing because she was already retired from ECRO, and working at the Foreign Services Accreditation Services of America. Am I saying that correctly? But she's retiring as our sponsorship coordinator. But I just want to acknowledge all the work that she has done in the past, and I wish her a very, very easy retirement. And with that, my reign is over. I give up power. This is a peaceful transition of power. I present to you your new president, Melanie Gottlieb.
So I have remarks, but we're way over time. So I'm going to save them for the closing. But I am going to ask you to do two things. First, I do hope that you will join us at Joanne and I at our session later this afternoon, 2 o'clock, to talk about Network of Networks, because your input is really crucial to how we plan in the future. And so we really do want that engagement. We want to hear from you. We want your ideas. We need your thoughtful, persistent input. So please come. I hope you will. And then also, we would not ever, I also actually just want to thank Jelger and the board that I serve with. So there is, every board stands on the shoulders of the board previous. And the boards, as we have progressed, have all done tremendous work. And it is a working board, and we are moving into a mode of a strategic board. And the work is not small. And so I just really want to extend my appreciation for everyone Thank you to all of my board members. And I'm excited for the next year. I should thank our sponsors one more time since we have the mic. I do want to thank Parchment, who is our gold level sponsor. We also have silver sponsors of Aruk and MyCreds and Macertif, College Source, Foreign Credential Services of America, U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation as a gold sponsor, Beta SAS as a silver sponsor, and World Education Services as a silver sponsor.
And ACRO. Don't forget ACRO.
Oh, and I guess I can't
I know
forget
you can't say it.
ACRO
I will
as
thank
well.
ACRO.
And, oh, and yes, I skipped right over. He's right here in National Student Clearinghouse. Thank you very much. We can't do this work without our sponsors and without our patrons and without our signatories. So thank you for being a part of this amazing network.
All right. I'm free.
So I'm just going to call up the next board session that's in this room. And I also want to signal to you wonderful people, just splash into the lunch. Don't worry, because it projects out into the lunch, and I already let Taki know as well. So welcome, friends, and I'm going to hand the mic over, I think probably to you, Simone, if that's okay. Thank you.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Okay. I'm just waiting for the slides to come.
Oh.
All right, there you go.
Intermission.
President, that's my phone.
Yep. This is my folder.
All right, so we wanted to come back here this year and report on an initiative that we teased at GDN last year. Hopefully it's going to make sense, because it was about making sense of data, particularly around microcredentials. It's going to be me doing a little bit of framing, Jeannie, who's really going to tell you what happened. Then we have Taki from Melbourne on the line, who's been actively participating in doing this work. Hey, Taki.
Oh, there he is.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, all right. So I wanted to bring back a couple of friends that I introduced last year, Woody and Buzz. I guess we probably can all agree that we are in full swing in this credentialing hype cycle. So depending on what stage you think we are, you might either feel more like Woody or Buzz. So this crowd for me is frankly more like Buzz, looking at the future, being super excited. But if I were to characterize Woody, I don't know, I'm thinking employers maybe. They still have to figure out what credentials mean and how to use them. But it's clear, credentials are everywhere, whether they're macro, micro, or nano, whatever. So let me ask you a question. What do you think is the most impactful technology that we have today? It should roll off the tongue. Internet? AI? Close enough. I would say it's language. Not necessarily recent, but even in AI, we talk about large language models. And language is also how, we came up with our stories, with our policies, principles, and frankly, the first way we've been interoperating with each other. Last year, I dropped a slide which was a little bit controversial, but I definitely believe that as much as we do work around interoperability, we should stop talking about it and just doing it, right? So thankfully, I was in London recently, and at a Banksy museum, I found this mural. I thought it was a much better take of what I meant. So language is important. It's how English is probably the first standard that we use almost every day in our work. But words are super important. And although we have English as an interoperable language, there are many words in different languages that do not have translations. So they're not interoperable at definition level, but if you go into the semantics of them, they are. One of my favorite words here is sobremesa, which means the time that you spent sitting at the table after you had a meal together. It's untranslatable, but it's rich in meaning, right? Another word that you might be familiar with is Ubuntu. This could actually mean something to some of you and something completely different to others. Ubuntu is a distribution of an open source software, but also in, I think, Israeli, it means a delightful thing. It means I am because we are, which I think is a great word for a community and a network. Mm-hmm. Another untranslatable word would be microcredentials. And so a few years ago, UNESCO took a stab at trying to come up with a universal definition of this word. Epic fail. And so we still now ask ourselves, what is the definition of microcredentials? And we thought that we needed to go beyond that. So if we cannot get to consensus over a definition, why don't we look inside microcredentials? Why don't we look inside the semantic layer of microcredentials to try to be able to understand each other and make sense of them? And so we started to just really go deeper into the data elements, the metadata, that make up a microcredentials. Now, that was a very interesting exercise. And it kind of makes us understand that, a lifelong learning journey or understanding each other, making sense of stuff, we tend to rush into a feeling that we're super expert as new things come into the horizon. So everyone became an overnight expert in microcredentials. And then as you look inside it, into the meaning layer, you realize, well, maybe we don't really get it or we don't agree on stuff. And so you go through this sort of trough of, I realized that I really don't know what I thought I knew. And over time, I guess, as we deal with it, that we really gain competence. And so this is an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I think applies to microcredentials. The work was really enabled by picking up signals around policies that were being made around microcredentials in Australia, for example. And these were interesting triggers because for the first time we have policies that are political documents, narratives that came with annexes that advised or recommended data elements that we should use to describe our microcredentials. Australia was the first one to do it. A few years later, Europe, in their own European microcredentials policies, came up with the famous or infamous Annex 1 that highlights what are the mandatory data elements and what are the optional ones. So now we have a way to really think or speak about microcredentials in a different way, in the data. And for the credentials nerds, freaks, that was important requirements to build this mapping. And the mapping is really what we started to do with the Apple Credential Engine and with a beautiful tool that was developed by T3 Innovation Network. Credential Engine really took it to scale. And so we embarked on this project around mapping microcredentials through data. So we looked at the existing recommendation in terms of data requirements that were coming from the policies, Australia and Europe, and then other specifications that we had. And we tried to map them and start to create a new layer of meaning. And that is a project that we called, the Microcredentials Landscape, a global mapping initiative. The report was just published in August, and that is what I would ask Jeannie to talk about.
Well, this is actually the precursor to the report. I would encourage you, if everybody's got their phones, you can go ahead. Everyone can, scan this, and you can take a look at the kind of this is going on kind of information, but then we actually did it, right? Taki actually did it. So you can go ahead and go to the next. So here is a persona, a scenario that, everybody has talked about at this event, and, we're all thinking about. And of course, there's many components to this, but we want to kind of peel back the onion and look at the layer that we can contribute towards. And that is this mapping. And how can this little slice of the pie help enable this kind of story? To unlock the potential of microcredentials, there's a lot going on out there. You know, everybody here is working on different aspects of that because they are in fact a real thing. They are really happening. So what we want to do is kind of build a foundation that could help better understand what the value is, unpack them, as Simone was saying, based on the data, the metadata. What do they actually mean? What is this micro-credential that I'm looking at based on how it is defined in different areas of the world? So that's what this session is all about. And we really want to think, of course, about the benefits of doing this type of work. And again, that's only being one piece of it. We're not trying to make a claim that by doing a mapping, we're solving all of the issues with micro-credentials that are out there. But understanding what they mean is vital. It is vital. So there can be many benefits. And there's going to be another slide with a scan tag to see the report and see more benefits, and a big listing of benefits that the CTDL advisory group came up with that you could probably add more to them. So we just want to look at and here's our report. Scan this tag here and take a look at the report. I promise you it's not too long. And it will get into some of the details of the mapping that will help you understand the scoping of it and some of the things we won't cover here in this session today. So go ahead and download it. And we're calling this an initial report because really what we wanted to do is lay the framework and the groundwork for extending it. We needed to have a starting point, and we're going to take a look at what that starting point consists of, thanks to Taki and some other experts in micro-credential schemas who volunteered to work on this. So, and this is where I'm going to have Taki come on into the conversation. Please, I just want to point out a couple of things here that, as I said, this is a volunteer effort, but these are experts, experts in the areas that they did the mapping for. And Taki was one of them, and Taki did MyCreds Canada and My Equals badges. And we also had an expert on open badges, Nate Otto. Some of you may know him. He was one of the original, came up with the open badge specification, so he knows the space. And we had Ildiko with European Learning Model. Of course, one of my team members with the Credential Transparency Description Language. So just want everyone to know we had the people who understood these schemas to be able to do these mappings. It's exploratory. We need to learn from the process. And I wish Phil Berker, Taki, who coordinated and facilitated the mapping team, was here to kind of dive into that a little bit more because, it's, as you all already know, it's complicated. And the schema selection, as I said, we started with a sample. I'm going to toss it over to Taki now to just talk a little bit about that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jenny. And before we sort of go into some of the process and the mechanics of what we did, what was interesting about the whole process was frankly the timing from our point of view, or what was quite effective and useful. And by that, I mean, to the point that Simona made earlier around the very slow emergence of national micro-credential frameworks. Indeed, the one in Australia, as noted, originally published in November 2021. So we are talking, 2 or 3 years ago, 3+ years ago now. So it has taken a little bit of while to get a little bit of traction, but I guess these things tend to. So we had the perfect intersection of obviously the emergence of these frameworks and the slow but deliberate adoption of these frameworks all over the place. And of course, what we were doing with the My Equals community, which is important to call out, around reviewing our experience collectively as a credential community in Australia and New Zealand, and how we were using micro-credentials and badges. So I'll start by talking a little bit about that process, because we work with, in fact, Anthony Manahan, who I believe I hope is in the room, but I was going to say behind me, in front of you. And we worked with the community to essentially review what we had done, explore what we might what a future micro-credential state might look like across Australia and New Zealand. And we came together both as users of MyEquals, the platform, and the badges and micro-credentials within that ecosystem, and others who were not, in fact, using the platform. And both of those cohorts were really, really important to feed in their unique experiences into where we might land. And we had a number of different working group sessions where we iterated across, different approaches for different attributes and what made sense and what didn't make sense, whilst also borrowing from some of the learnings across the global ecosystem that was, of course, itself emerging. Now, what was interesting about, again, the National Microcredentials Framework in Australia was its key tenets. And of course, its key tenets reflected our own, right? So we say a lot that we work for learners. We always work for learners. We believe firmly and wholly and completely in learner mobility, and for them to be able to easily, effectively, and importantly, securely assert their claims and assert their awards for onward sort of employment or advanced study or migration or what have you. But also a clear call out to employers who, again, in this very sort of, skill-based economies now, employers being able to hire effectively and find the skills that they need as well. And then, of course, we have our providers, the education institutions that we work so closely with, that would allow them, again, another language or a dialect for them to be able to sort of create and craft the sorts of awards and credentials that would support learners to support employers. And of course, the overarching goal was the economic benefit, the collective economic benefit of being able to have a marketplace and a clear understanding of what all of these were. Now, thank you, Jeannie, for calling out Phil Barker. I was going to anyway, but Phil is an amazing chap working with Credential Engine, who I spent a lot of time with, and he helped me understand the different mappings that we were trying to do and some of the things that we were trying to achieve. And of course, he helped me understand how to use this beautiful tool, the DESM schema mapper, developed by T3 and then sort of carried on by Credential Engine. Now, it was interesting as well because having people like Nate sort of contribute the OB2 mappings, and of course, a bit of a segue into the OB3 mappings, which are themselves a bit of a leap and bound and quite interesting in terms of the way they relate to the past and indeed to the future. But also having the European learning model was really, really important. And having that stuff in there already helped us understand how we might sort of not only use the tool, but also it was almost a snapshot of the journey or a map of how the ecosystem itself had sort of evolved and developed, which was really, really important. So from there, essentially, we rolled up our sleeves, and I actually, to be perfectly frank, I had a number of goes at it, right? So what that meant was that we had to essentially ourselves iterate on the mappings and try again on what different sort of attributes and different parts of the specification may relate to other sort of specifications out there. And what's important is you have this idea of, I guess, relatability, right? So how does a specific attribute relate to another attribute? Is it purely a different term that is used? Is it a reworded attribute, but essentially it means the same thing? Is it perhaps an identical attribute? And so forth. Does it have a level of similarity? You know, it might have a certain portion of it is the same, but otherwise it perhaps has a subtly different intent. And of course, you've even got attributes that align on a conceptual level that may not necessarily be able to be crosswalked, but are kind of generally trying to achieve the same thing. So it really was about going through every single attribute. And of course, we were always built on the OB2 standard. So that was a great sort of starting point for us. We were able to sort of get up and running quite quickly. But between that and the work that we did with the MyEquals working group down here as to align to the National Microcredential Framework, in addition to the other attributes and specifications that the community wanted to bring into the platform, it gave us a nice leap and bound to sort of be able to sort of map across these other standards. The other interesting one, finally, is the bringing essentially the same mechanism or the same experience into the MyCreds Canada badges experience. Now, the point there was obviously it is the same platform and ultimately it is built on the same specifications and standards, but it recognises that they will evolve together but also separately. So it recognises again that we do have different needs regionally. We do have different needs around the mobility experience and so forth. So again, it acknowledges that these specifications will continue to evolve, and it acknowledges that we will continue to align and realign to make sure that we continue to define and allow the crosswalks to effectively happen. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Taki. Thank you for covering all that. Yeah, and if we can just kind of maybe just go to the next slide. Let's see where we're at here. So you're probably, wondering, well, okay, well, how do you really use this? There are practical applications that we can actually begin exploring now with this, and that includes a data transformation. So this mapping can enable literally transforming the content of a microcredential from one system to another by understanding those kinds of mappings. And we actually have a group in Europe that has done an initial foray and research and has a working model for using the output from this mapping and being able to use it for interoperability. So there could be, as I said, there's many benefits, but there's also practical applications that we can begin exploring now and into the future with this initial mapping. And AI was not used for any of this. Right now, this is the experts who know these schemas, who are participating with this mapping. But since, of course, we need to be thinking about AI, there's obviously a lot of potential for AI here, because they're probably thinking, well, how do you sustain the mappings? How do you know they're current? So there could be definitely roles for AI here. And again, we're not using it, but the people have to do it first so we can know what it is that needs to be done. And then we can begin exploring things like real-time credential recognition, which is a big conversation to be had, right? So again, just some examples, and you could probably think of others as well. And this is where Taki might want to come in again. So the team that worked on this really worked closely together. They had a couple of meetings. They literally had a scope and what we call an abstract model. And they came together and agreed to what is the scope of this work. Anybody who's somewhat familiar with European learning model would know it's a very large schema. If you're familiar with CTDL, the Credential Transparency Description Language, it's very large. We had to parse out what are the important aspects that we could look at now and then expand in the future, again, just to make the value proposition. So we feel there were successes, and we want to acknowledge the challenges, right? So as Taki already alluded to, it was a very thoughtful process. And there are definitely challenges, but we think the successes are worth overcoming the challenges. And do you want to touch on any of those, Taki?
Yeah, just briefly, I think I want to highlight again just the effectiveness of the whole process, and by that I mean this is essentially like a retrospective. If you're a little bit familiar with agile sort of engineering principles and so forth, so this part of the end game, if you like, was really, really important because it did allow us to reflectively look back on the process itself. Indeed, what worked, like it says here, successes and challenges, and what it kind of does is it provides a framework to build upon and to improve. So you had all the mappers essentially coming together, again, with Phil Barker, who was a steward, in fact, an effective steward of the whole process. And it allowed us to very openly and honestly talk about, again, there was some subjectivity at times to the process, but also talking to what improvements may lay ahead and what may make an effective tool to improve the mapping to allow sort of better understanding going forward. Thanks, Jenny.
So it's more than just a report. We really have the real mapping, and you could look at it. I think maybe on the next slide, you can use your phone, you could use your laptop. Now, I did put a little note on the bottom there for best use a tablet size or larger. If you look at it on your phone, turn it like this. One of the projects that's going on right now is responsive design for that page. So, regardless, this is the mapping, and this is real. And what you're seeing here is literally a screenshot of the data ecosystem schema mapper tool. We're very bad at naming tools. We like really long names. And this is the mapping. And what you're seeing at the top where I've got kind of the red box around it, that's the menu of the mapping. And so what's mapping are what we call abstract classes because schemas have different data models. So we have to abstract them and map based on these categories: assertion, micro-credential claimed. You'll note that it says micro-credential specification that's highlighted in blue, and that's because on the menu, that's the one I picked. And I picked that one because that is where the CTDL really fits, the credential transparency description language. It's front and center right there, and you can really get a feel for the robust mapping on that particular tab. But this is the initial mapping. What you're seeing below it is literally the properties or elements in a schema. So a schema is like a dictionary. It's a list of terms that should be defined. And so on the left, we're seeing, for example, it's a description. So that's literally the description of the micro-credential. Below it is the definition for the credential transparency description language. And to the right of it, you're seeing the pairwise mappings to that property right there for each one of those schemas that we discussed. Those colorful buttons tell you if it's an identical match, if it's reworded, and so on and so forth. And as I said, from this app, oh, and at the top, you can download it too. So you can download it as a CSV, you can download it as machine-readable data as well for that interoperability part of it. So this is what it looks like. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have that page updated so it looks pretty on your phone too. And building on implications for future mappings, you know, we really want to stress that this was an initial foray, right? It was an exploration. We had this great idea through the CTDL advisory group. We wrote a project plan. We're able to organize volunteers and selected schemas that we knew we could have initial success with. But we need to expand the scope, and we need to expand on the mappings that have been completed. So there's probably folks here that you're like, well, my country or region has a micro-credential definitions, and we want to get it mapped. So you can contact us. Our contact information is on the last slide, and everybody knows Simone, so just call Simone.
First of all, if you want to get anything done efficiently, call Jeannie. In terms of what's next and just engaging all of you in this work, so we really started picking up signals from the policies, from the microcredentials frameworks that had data requirements in it. And so we had this in Australia, we had this in Europe. But as we talk about frameworks, I'm looking at Africa, who's led the way on the qualification framework. So whenever there is a new microcredentials framework being designed on the policy level, consider adding an annex that says these are the data elements that we want to see. We'll take that and we can plug it in here. And so what that's going to do, hopefully, is make sense of microcredentials, which should help with recognition, particularly around student or workers' mobility. So that if you have taken a microcredentials in Australia and you're traveling to Europe, the recognition process will be streamlined by having this mapping available. Someone would say recognition through data. Is that, how far ahead is that? But the idea is really to enable those crosswalks, the mapping, and just understanding finally what is that we mean with microcredentials. I just wanted to clarify, talk about one quick thing. So the work that we did in Australia was really timely, as Taki said, because of the microcredentials framework just was being looked at by the universities, and the challenge becomes like when you have a tool, so the policy should shape the tools, but what happens is that often the tools shape us. Okay, our practice. And there is often, at least I find, a conflation between microcredentials, again, words, and badges, right? So some people use it interchangeably, but ACRO provided actually a very helpful streetwise definition for me in just for the relationship of badges and microcredentials. So I think ACRA says, like, a diploma is to a degree what a badge is to a microcredential. Now that's not, it is streetwise. I mean, I think it helps. But the important thing here is for me, to understand that when, we looked at microcredentials, the initial support, the technological support, the, recognition technology that immediately started to show up in support of microcredentials were badges, open badges. It was the most mature, readily available, easy to implement digital credential type to support microcredentialing strategies. And so the work that we did in Australia was taking the open badges specification, right, and extending it through the mechanisms that are allowed for by the standard to be able to be compliant with the Australian Microcredentials Framework. So those extensions now make it possible that the MyEquals badges are fully compliant with the new framework, and those extensions and the mapping is what went into this, this exercise. So we now have technical specifications that are compliant with the microcredentials frameworks that are mapped across regions. And we think that's a great start, but it is a start. We want to have more microcredentials framework. We probably expect that there will be more emerging and coming. And so if any of you has any idea or knowledge of this frameworks being available, you'd be welcome to join the mapping team if you have the technical expertise. Otherwise, Credential Engine is, has done an amazing job at, putting this on rails and making sure that we have now a report that we can build on.
Yep. And again, this work came out of the Credential Transparency Description Language, CTDL. And if you don't know CTDL, you can just Google CTDL and you'll get all kinds of links to valuable, helpful information. But we have an advisory group. It's open to anyone who wants to join. This is the kind of projects that are going to continue to come out of this group. So if you want to get involved, we welcome you to join. There was information about the T3 Innovation Network, as Simone mentioned. That tool came out of our work with that network as well. And you can contact us. And like I said, everybody knows you, Simone, so you just text him.
And so hopefully we'll be able to move microcredentials from that list of untranslatable words into something that really makes sense in the future. All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Taki.
Yeah, thank you, Taki.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you.